there's enormous amounts of evidence showing that the increase in use of social media, especially in young kids, correlate with huge increases in depression and anxiety levels, particularly in young girls. So when kids started getting the smartphones and started to spend more and more, 7 hours a day on social media, that's when the anxiety and depression went up. That's for young kids. I use social media as well as a tool for business. That is a little bit different. I'm not 13 years old, and you're not 13 years old. So there's some warnings I think that need to go into that. But let me be clear. No, it's not the same. Social media is not the same as social interactions face to face with people.
Are you concerned about what social media is doing to our brains?
Yes.
Because we hear those stats around, young girls are struggling most with social media, and we think to ourselves, well, that's because there's a lot of like comparison and all these kinds of things, and there's a lot of like toxic messaging and such. But if we think about the physiological consequences of social media, what it's actually doing to our brains at a chemical level,
yeah.
What would you as a neuroscientist guess is the physiological harm to the brain? Not the sort of psychological, I'm thinking about like not the psychological, okay, oh my God, she's more this than me, but like the physiological harm.
But the psychological harm causes stress. Stress releases stress hormone that goes into the brain that at too high and too constant a level can start to first damage connections and then kill cells. So it's intertwined there, and that is part of what is happening. You can't pull one away from the other.
Because where social media is designed to kind of, it's like pulling the slot machine handle. I pull down on the feed and I get ping. Oh look, there's a nice picture, and oh ping. There's notifications and comments, etc. It's that I think about the constant. They say this constant dopamine hit.
Yeah.
They refer to it. Is it a dopamine hit? Is that what's happening when we're being stimulated by social media or a slot machine?
Yes.
And is there any harm in just a constant dopamine hit all day, every day?
Well, I'm going to answer that question by saying I would not want to be addicted to gambling. Gambling is addictive. It's hard to get away. You lose all these other things that we just decided were all good for you, including sleep, including social connections, including exercise. And I think that's part of what social media is doing for our young kids is not good, that they're not joining teams outside to be social and interactive in that kind of, now it seems like an old-fashioned way, but it's very, very powerful way for development and brain health.
I think I'm addicted to my phone. And I often ask myself, is that a problem? And from what you've said, it sounds like the problem is what I sacrifice through that like addiction to that device.
Yes.
Is that the issue? The issue is I sacrifice social connections, maybe movement.
Yeah.
Although I do work out every day, but the brain is smart enough to know that there's no substitute for real human connections.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's going to make me what? I need you to help me scare me out of this phone addiction that I think I have, but I know many other people have as well.
So that is going to limit your potential for brain growth, for brain plasticity. It is going to limit your possibility for not to be dramatic, but joy in your life. There's different kinds of joy that you have in real person-to-person social interactions that it feels pretty good on social media if you get lots of likes and but it's not the same. And I would say that to scare yourself out, you're going to have to bite the bullet and do a 2-week phone detox. What would that do to you? How would you feel?
I just could never imagine such a thing.
Well.
Which is a real shame, isn't it, really? Because I just think about like my ancestors and my parents. They must think I'm so strange, but it's just the way that, like, when my phone dies, I'm like nervously waiting for it to come back on. I'm like staring at it like, oh my God, like what am I going to do with myself? Like, and I remember those studies they did on people where they gave them the choice of either sitting alone with their own thoughts or giving themselves an electric shock, and a huge amount of people in that study actually would rather give themselves an electric shock than just sit alone with their thoughts, because it's some kind of stimulation. That's kind of how I think I am now. Like, I don't know what I'd do without my phone. It's really sad. I know there's people listening to me now that think I'm an absolute, like, I'm really sad, but it's just it's the truth, you know? And I do wonder what it's doing to my brain, but I think you're right. I think it's actually what it's doing to my life.
Yeah.
The joy, the connections,
Right.
the being there to experience things. And
I mean, that point that you made is a very profound one. The not wanting to be alone with your thoughts is the core of meditation. Can you be alone with your thoughts and focus on something organic, usually the breath, but also a thought like loving kindness? That is a very powerful practice to do, and it's hard. I find it hard too, and I notice I find it harder when I'm using social media and when I'm using my phone more. But I feel most creative and most imaginative when I do practice that. That is, being alone with my thoughts. What comes into mind? How does my own imagination work? Which is very much dependent on the hippocampus as well. It's putting together all these things in your memory in new and interesting ways that are unique for you or unique for me. And it doesn't work the same if you are stimulating your brain with social media all the time.
you, you wrote a book that kind of speaks to what we're talking about here. You wrote a book about anxiety.
Yes, I did.
2021. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the US version is called Good Anxiety, isn't it?
Yeah.
Slightly different title in the UK.
Yeah.
Why did you write a book about anxiety?
I wrote a book about anxiety because I started to notice my students getting much more anxious than they ever used to be. And this was before the pandemic. I mean, I had the idea to write this book in 2018, 2019. And so at first I noticed it in the students. They were getting so stressed out before finals. They never did that before. So many accommodations they were asking for. And I'm like, well, what's going on here? But then I realized it wasn't just them. Like, I'm getting more anxious as well. My friends are more anxious. And I really wanted to dive into that. I didn't want to be anxious in that way. Because part of me was like, oh, I'm just a New Yorker. I'm just anxious all the time, right? Because that's what New Yorkers are. No, this has changed. And we forget that before the pandemic, there was still global warming. There was still political issues that lots of people, including me and all of my students, were worried about. And that was the impetus for trying to dive in and ask, well, I made my life happier with exercise. What is the approach when it's anxiety? And not clinical anxiety. I did not have clinical anxiety, and the vast majority of my students didn't have clinical anxiety. They had what I called everyday anxiety, just worried about the things that are going on in the world, and there were just more things to be worried about.
Is that normal? Is that human?
That is human, absolutely.
But is it human is the quantity in which we experience it human?
I think it is. I mean,
because I think about my ancestors. Okay, they probably, I don't know. I always imagine my ancestors kind of, I don't know, just chilling. You know, like
but they didn't have global warming where the ocean is about to, get sucked up in plastic and the ozone is going to come down. No worries like that at all.
But the everyday anxiety for me is like emails and WhatsApp.
Well, by everyday anxiety, I mean the anxiety that people are feeling today that is not at the clinical level. So all the things that we just mentioned, global warming and wars in multiple places in the world, all of that contributes to the higher level of anxiety. And your ancestors and mine went through 2 world wars, and that was anxiety provoking, no question about it. But they weren't also all the other things that were contributing to it, including the higher than, extremely high anxiety and suicide levels of our young people that are, strongly linked to social media. So that's another element.
What did you find then when you started uncovering and trying to go on this search of figuring out, the nature of anxiety and what we can do about it? Did you first find that you're right in your hypothesis that it is increasing?
Yeah.
How much? Do you know how much?
It shifted over the time that I wrote and published the book, because I started in 2018 and then it was published in the middle of the pandemic in 2021, where anxiety levels went up approximately 20% worldwide. So, but the social media anxiety, that is going up in girls even more than 20%. That's kind of in parallel. So I actually don't know how to integrate those two levels, but they're both going in the same direction.
Why are women, young women, becoming more anxious, and suicidality amongst that age group is rapidly increased?
I think that it's that comparison that is so easy to do. And I see it in my own work at the university that when I was going to college, I had no idea what rank I was in number in the application, but they could see that immediately. They know exactly what number they are in each and every class they take, in their whole high school class, in their application to the 5 schools that they applied to, or 10 or 15 now that they're applying to. That gives a much higher level of stress when you know those numbers immediately, that we never had. So there are stresses like that they're experiencing.
More information.
Yeah.
More. It's funny because more social connection. But when I say social connection, I don't mean real world social connection. I mean more followers and likes and more people that can message me and tell me something and DM me or comment on my thing.
Right.
More noise.
Yeah.
The volume's increased, which just seems to be driving more anxiety. Where do we experience anxiety? Where, from a physiological standpoint, where is anxiety? Because it feels like it's in your chest.
Yeah. So anxiety is kind of a full body experience. And anxiety is strongly linked with the stress response. So an anxiety-provoking situation, you meet somebody that you had a big fight with before. Oh, I'm anxious. I might have to speak to that person before. That launches the stress response that is dependent on what's called the sympathetic nervous system. And so this is where it becomes full body. So what happens when your fight or flight system is activated? Your heart rate goes up, your respiration goes up, your irises get bigger so you can see everything and look out for that annoying person that you're worried about. And blood is shunted from your digestion and reproductive organs towards your muscles so you can fight or run away. That's what all of our ancestors evolved to protect us from, not the social media post, but the lion or the tiger that could come and attack us. So it made sense for that kind of stressor or that kind of threat. Unfortunately, our body's doing the same exact thing when the nasty DM comes in from somebody I wasn't sure who it is, but they're saying something really bad about something I care about a lot. And we get this stress response, we get anxious because of that. And somebody asked me, does that mean our brain is not very smart? And the answer is our stress and our threat system is not very smart. It isn't differentiating between the line that could physically kill us and the DM that might wound our pride, but will not kill us. But it causes the same kind of stress response and anxiety response.
What do I do about that?
You have to learn how to turn the volume of your own anxiety down. And part of that is, I'm not saying you have to not look at your DMs and not look at social media. There's lots of ways to turn your anxiety down. We've already talked about some of those approaches. Exercise immediately decreases anxiety and depression levels. And there, you don't even have to get aerobic. 10 minutes of walking can significantly decrease your anxiety and depression levels. That is a powerful tool that everybody can use right here, right now. Breath meditation. Did you know that breath meditation, that is deep breathing, is the oldest form of meditation? Why? Because equal and opposite to that fight or flight response that everybody seems to know about is the rest and digest part of your nervous system, called the parasympathetic nervous system, that calms you down. It slows your heart rate down, slows your respiration rate down, and shunts blood from your muscles towards your digestion and reproductive organs so that you can do those weekend rest and digest kinds of things. Well, everybody should be asking, well, do I have that system? Yes, everybody has that system. Everybody has a parasympathetic nervous system. How do I activate that? The best and most effective way that you could activate that right now is take 3 deep breaths, because that's the only thing you have conscious control over that can launch all the rest of that parasympathetic activity, slowing your heart rate. I can't slow my heart rate by thinking about it. Can I take 3 deep, slow breaths right now? Absolutely. And monks, hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, realized that. That is the thing that I can do immediately to slow my stress response down. It's very, very powerful.
Sadness.
Sadness is can be linked with anxiety, and sadness, like anxiety, is something that people, I think, would like to kick out of their lives and just never have any more at all. If I could get rid of sadness and anxiety, I would be the happiest person alive. But would you? Because my argument in Good Anxiety, my book Good Anxiety, is that these prickly emotions, these difficult emotions like anxiety, like sadness, are really, really valuable because they're focusing us on things that we should be paying attention to, specifically anxiety. It is a warning system. Oh, there's that person. Oh, you didn't have a good interaction. You need to pay attention. Now, should it throw you into an anxiety attack? Perhaps not. Use some of these techniques, like deep breathing and going for a walk. But it is a warning system. And why is this valuable? Here's why it's valuable. It's valuable because when you know what you are worried about, your fears that your anxiety focuses you on, it actually tells you about what you hold most dear in your life. And that is something that we should all really want to know. So if you're a people pleaser, you are doing lots of things, maybe too many things to please people, but that means that you care about personal interaction. And I start with this one because I'm a people pleaser. And I realized that people-pleasing response and the anxiety that it does evoke is reminding me that what's very, very valuable to me is that interaction with people. I care about that. That's a beautiful thing. I value that in my life, in my personality.